This series of videos introduces the 38 chapters of the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. It's a project of the Social Change Lab, and we gratefully acknowledge the support of the Mary Lee Bequest for the work of our team.
Okay. Hi, I'm Winifred Lewis. I'm a professor in the School of Psychology. I study social psych.
I'm Dr. Robin Gulliver. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the School of Communication and Arts at the University of Queensland.
I'm Dr. Susilo Ibisono. I am postdoctoral research fellow at School of Psychology, University of Queensland.
Yeah, and obviously we're here to talk about our chapters. And so I'm going to share with you folks, because I perceive that many people in our audience may not actually know this, but this is Oceania. It has 4 regions in it: Australasia, and that includes Australia and New Zealand, as well as these other areas, Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia. And it's quite a large area, about 8.5 million kilometers squared, with a small population, only 41 million. So just for comparison, the US has about 9 million square kilometers, but a population of 330 million. And Europe has about 9 million or 10 million square kilometers and a population of 750 million. So I guess one of the consequences of that is that there's a very small number of people spread out over a big area. And when we wrote the chapter, we kind of came up with 3 themes, and one of them was about this regional spread. Cecilio, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so one point that we emphasize in the chapter is that different areas have different challenges, from rise tides and also challenges with the mining corporation, with the biodiversity loss. And there are many problems that the people have related to the environmental problems and the climate change issues.
Something that's also quite special about Oceania is that it is a continent of adaptations. So it's famous for very large migrations, some of the migrations that are the biggest ever in the world, and also populations moving from island to island to cope with their own challenges in different places and adapt. So even though there has been a lot of adaptation, though, with the advent of colonization, a lot of things, including society structures, changed. There's a lot of great loss of life, loss of culture, and that really precipitated some of the problems that we see happening right now today.
Yeah, that's right. There's still ongoing legacies of, military occupation and corporate extractivism when foreign corporations come in and pillage the resources of local communities and local ecosystems without any regard for the inhabitants, whether human or non-human animals or plants.
Arguably, that may have even started what we could consider to be the environmental movement. There were environmental groups after the 1800s with colonization, when we have records to be able to see when those environmental groups started. But the nuclear testing that started in the 50s, but really became widespread and well known in the 60s and 70s, meant that a lot of these groups had to start their own pushback on that testing and frame it in different ways that aligned with the communities that they were talking to and involved in.
And they had quite a diversity of kind of organizing structures, didn't they, Robin?
Yeah, they did. And I guess that's because nuclear testing did affect quite a few places, especially in Micronesia, but also the larger countries like New Zealand, where I'm from, played an important role in solidarity and to stop it. So messages that you might see and the types of groups that developed in New Zealand were quite different from those in Micronesia and Polynesia, where they were having to actually use direct action, if you like, try and stop blockades to stop these events occurring. Whereas in Australia, you had the Friends of the Earth movement come in. So that's a transnational organisation, but lots of little groups started popping up, aligning with Friends of the Earth, but doing their own things in their own communities. So this eruption, if you like, of activism and different group structures in which it took place.
Yeah. And that local diversity really offered a strength to the movement, didn't it, Cecilio?
Yes, so that's why framing the message about environmental problems are very important, especially how to connect the issues with the norms of the local peoples in different area of Oceania. Yeah, so I mean, if the way we frame the message is different or conflicting with the people's norms, they might come with a backlash. But make them engage with environmental problems that they have. We need to frame and consider the people norms more accurately to create the frames and create a message about the environmental problems and communicate with them.
Yeah, that was like a key message in the chapter for me. Like, I really enjoyed learning about how the environmental movement against climate change, for example, mobilized really successfully with faith-based groups. And there's a lot of action and unity around that, and regional action, regional councils that took action. But then for me, one of the most powerful examples of how really localized framing can be incredibly effective and even transformative was when the Maori people in this millennium, in the 2000s, were able to make an argument for the personhood of an important river, the Wanganui River. Am I pronouncing that right, Robin?
Yes.
Thank you.
Wanganui.
That's
Yeah.
relief. So the idea is, we think of persons as humans, of course, but we know that corporations are persons in the eyes of the law, and that's been very powerful for them in terms of their functioning. So what the Maori were able to do is make an argument based on their spiritual and cultural practice that the river is actually appropriately considered to be a person in the eye of the law and therefore protected against pollution. And that's been really successfully deployed since it was brought forward and imitated around the world by other Indigenous communities. And to me, that speaks to the third lesson of the chapter, which was really about how the different political opportunity structures have created different ways that environmental groups can connect and be effective. So because of the colonization in New Zealand and the Treaty of Wanganui, which was only started to be really respected in the last couple of decades, it was then that an opportunity arose to use this powerful lever and change the kind of approach to pollution and so on in doing so.
I would say that New Zealand might be a fairly unique case in that it does have a treaty signed by some Māori tribes with the Crown when there was colonisation in New Zealand, whereas there is no treaty with Aboriginal Australians.
That's
and
right.
Aboriginal Australians, of course, suffered from, you could clearly argue, effectively genocide through this colonisation. But in New Zealand, we had some Resource Management Act, which put the onus on people who want to develop something. So, for example, if they want to create a wharf on the Whanganui River, they have to get permission, if you like, from the community to do that. And so because of this different way in which resources were managed in the first place, the court case about giving personhood to the Whanganui River, it had a place it could go. Whereas if you tried to do that in Australia, and some groups have, so far it's not been affected. So that is one of a really clear example how different opportunities enable different tactics to be successful.
Yeah. And I think like once we start looking at the kind of alignment of the messages to the local communities like Cecilio and you were talking about, we can also start looking at the alignment of the political and governance structures to those communities. Because for me, I'll be really looking forward to the other chapters, but one of the key learnings I've got in the last few years on the environment is how much having appropriate responsive governance is vital to having appropriate responsiveness to the environment, because it's when the state is really captured by these vested interests and often foreign interests that we see the local environments completely destroyed and communities oppressed and environmentalists persecuted.
Yes, Cecilio, with Papua New Guinea, in the chapter we note and a lot of issues that are ongoing about community impacts of resource extraction, not just environmental, but of course West Papua is also having many problems just with trying to gain independence. So in many of these countries, there's really significant issues that people are trying to overcome, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yep.
I always want to point out that, so New Zealand, and perhaps other people in other chapters might have the same incident, but we had a famous example of how community backlash can occur against when things go wrong for the state. So we had our boat, Greenpeace, which people knew about, the Rainbow Warrior boat, but they weren't particularly interested in, I have to say. But as far as I was aware, I was a child, but it got bombed and someone died on it. And boy, did that radically alter New Zealand's approach to nuclear weapons, nuclear energy. It it is still a no nuclear country in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in the other chapters, other authors might be able to point to similar things that have happened.
Yeah. When the community is able to unite in the face of that kind of outrageous behavior. Yeah.
And
I
especially
think,
because it was from it was by the French. That was
yeah.
that was really powerful as well, because they were, of course, doing the nuclear testing.
Yeah. That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is the first recording that we're doing as a team, and I've really enjoyed the recording process. So maybe we'll finish there. Unless, do you guys want to say anything else before I go, Cecilia?
I think that's all.
All right. I'll close now.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
For those of you watching, be sure to subscribe and follow us at Social Change UQ, and check out our website for more videos.